Thank you so much, Anna. It's really good to be here with everybody and to be having this conversation. And Carl actually, I think, laid out some really nice examples of what the Blue-Green Alliance is trying to do. So as Anna mentioned, what we try to do in all of our work is ultimately look at environmental challenges that we're facing today and figure out how to turn those into economic and job-creating opportunities. Ultimately, for me, we will struggle to win on climate change if we cannot connect the impacts and the opportunities to everyday people across this nation. And I think we have seen that in a host of different ways. And, you know, I think to some degree, I work with a population that really voted in a very different way than we anticipated in this most recent election, and that's workers across the board in states that the Blue-Green Alliance is anchored in Michigan and Illinois and Minnesota and Pennsylvania. And it was sort of a wake-up call for us that, hey, there's something we're missing here when we're talking about a host of different issues. And I think the environmental space has been an area that there's been some good work in sort of dividing us. And that's a problem. That's a problem for climate. It's a problem for the economy. And that's where we're trying to now really refocus and get back to on how do we bring this story back to the everyday American and create those opportunities so that they not only do they believe in climate change and support a transition to a cleaner economy, but they realize it impacts them every single day on potentially the job that they have that plays a role in this space. So I'm going to highlight just two examples of work that the Blue-Green Alliance is currently taking on in many of our states across the nation. And one of them is Building Clean, we call it. Ultimately, it is taking a look at the multifamily affordable housing space and trying to increase energy efficiency retrofits in that space. A lot of people, why the affordable housing space? When you start breaking down the numbers, there are, most of those families are paying in excess of 20 to 25% more on utility costs than the average American. So you're automatically working in a population that is struggling to get into a prosperous economic place, and now they're being burdened with really significant utility costs. So we have started looking at that space and realizing there's a huge opportunity there to improve the lives of people. And at the same time, when we started looking at sort of the domestic supply of energy efficiency products, that we have a pretty robust manufacturing base in that space. So what we are trying to do, we have pulled together a database of over 2,500 different companies that supply some kind of component piece, whether it's everything from HVAC to coatings and ceilings that go into helping to secure the shell of homes and energy efficiency, and are helping to share that information with contractors, with elected officials, so that you're sort of getting multiple benefits out of this effort. You're improving people's lives, you're helping them in their daily life affordability, you're driving domestic manufacturing, which ultimately gets to where we see some of these really good, strong American jobs. And then you also obviously have the added benefit of energy efficiency that is helping to address climate change. So that's sort of how the Blue-Green Alliance, with all of its associated members, try to think about how do we take this down to the local level and take on projects that impact a lot of different things at once. And clearly we've seen significant loss in our manufacturing space and our middle class, and that's really where a lot of our labor partners and our worker groups come from. It's like, how do we regain some of that space and do it here at home? If we're going to do the work here at home, let's also expand that supply chain. So that's one of the spaces that we're working in. And then the other one, and I think this really goes into the transition, is the real need to examine where these transitions are happening and where the jobs are being created in this new advanced energy space. And oftentimes they do not overlap. So we're seeing communities that are stranded because of closures of coal plants. We're now seeing this in the nuclear space. And as many folks know, these are some of the best paying jobs in a very large area around these plants. There are people that have worked there their entire lives. The tax base for the schools is based on the taxes, the income that comes in to these coal plants. So on one hand, we're doing, making really tremendous strides on cutting fossil fuels and climate change, which is critically important. But we can't forget these communities that have relied on this as their source of income and their livelihood for generations many times. And this also goes not only coal plants, but also, Appalachia and out west that have mined coal to build our nation. So remembering to not leave those folks behind and thinking through how do we, one, not only transition and think about options for those workers, but it has to be a broader community effort. And really one of the best models I saw of that, when I previously to BlueGreen Alliance, I worked for Secretary Moniz at the Department of Energy. And we worked very closely with the POWER program under the Obama administration. And POWER really looked at an entire economic development plan for the community. It was a very inclusive process, and it leveraged, probably over a dozen federal agencies to go to these areas and lay out what programs they had for everything from retraining from the Department of Labor to the Economic Development Agency, which has dollars for real implementation of businesses, of programs that can create jobs and sort of rebuild a community after they've lost their anchor institution like a coal plant. And this is the kind of work that I really believe in. I think it takes it to everyday people who really have not been exposed tremendously to science. A lot of people are like, what does a scientist look like? Well, we have the opportunity to go and share that we're just people as well, and we have these resources at the federal level that really can be leveraged together to make some pretty significant impacts. And I think the challenge for a lot of these communities, they're spinning, they're very scared, they really just don't know how to approach some of this. So being able to help work through a planning process from everything from the workers at the plant to the community writ large really helps, I think, to ease some of the angst and the fear and the fighting that we're seeing in this transition that's happening, certainly well beyond any of our control, just seeing it in economics and the transition from coal to lower priced natural gas. But that's the kind of thing that I think really will begin to take pretty significant steps on realizing climate change for a lot of people. And that's one of the big things that the BlueGreen Alliance is really trying to do, and make sure the jobs that are created and coming in this advanced space are good jobs that can support families and give people a reason to want to fight for this kind of transition. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Hillary. And now we're going to turn to Dan.